for joining us for Law in the Library. My name is Robert Reeders, and I'm a librarian in the Adult Services Department at the Headquarters Library. The Alachua County Library District and Three Rivers Legal Services have partnered for over 10 years on the Law in the Library series. Three Rivers Legal Services is an LSC that has provided free civil legal services since 1978. They have offices in Gainesville, Fernandina Beach, Jacksonville, and Lake City, and provide assistance on domestic violence, family law, housing and landlord-tenant issues, foreclosure defense, money and debt, veterans issues, record sealing and expungement, elder law, hurricane and disaster assistance, and public benefits. Their telephone number is 352-372-0519, and their website is https://www.trls.org. Today's topic is Social Security with Lauren Sleasman. Ms. Sleasman is a senior staff attorney at Three Rivers Legal Services and has been with them since 2015. She graduated from the Michigan State University College of Law and specializes in Social Security law, family law, and probate. And now I'd like to turn it over to her.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. As Robert said, my name is Lauren Sleasman. I work at the Gainesville Three Rivers office. And today I'm going to present on kind of a general overview of Social Security benefits and some of the issues that we see people run into along with Social Security. So one of the first things that people think of when they think of Social Security is SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income. It's also known as Title 16. That's the act that it falls under with Social Security, and it includes Medicaid coverage. The maximum benefit amount that you can receive when you're on SSI is what Social Security calls the federal benefit rate, or FBR, and it's set every year by Social Security. For 2024, the maximum that you can receive on SSI is $943 for an individual, or $1,415 for a couple who's both on SSI. SSI is need-based for persons with disabilities or who are over age 65. And in this case, disability is defined differently for children, for those who are under 18, and people who are over age 18. SSI is generally for people who do not have sufficient work credits to receive SSDI or other alternative Social Security benefits, such as retirement up to a certain amount. When receiving SSI, there are strict limitations on income and resources, and these usually make up the bulk of the issues that we see along with Social Security. Social Security for SSI recipients cap the resources or the assets that an individual has at $2,000, or for a couple, $3,000. And in this case, it does not matter if both people making that couple up are on SSI or if only one of them is on it. The $3,000 limit applies in general. And in terms of income, basically any money that someone earns while they're on SSI is going to lower the benefit amount they receive every month. So really, because SSI is need-based, it's for people who do not have work at all. Along with those limits, there are no additional benefits that are paid to family members. There's no survivors benefits or anything of that sort based on the actual SSI. A lot of times also, people will receive SSI as a supplement, again, as it's called, Supplemental Security Income, if they do maybe have some work history in order to receive SSDI, or if they receive retirement based on their work history. But if it's not up to the federal benefit rate, which is that $943 that I mentioned is the maximum you can receive in SSI, then you may receive a check every month for SSDI and SSI, with the SSI bumping that amount up to that annual maximum, that $943. And that amount changes every year. It's based on, or rather adjusted every year for some cost of living by the Social Security Administration. So SSI overpayment and cessation. How do overpayments occur? This is one of the biggest problems that we see at Three Rivers, and it's a serious problem that a lot of people have, especially when they're on SSI as they're already income limited. One of the first reasons that an overpayment occurs is because of resources. When someone is over asset, it's on a monthly basis. When they're over asset, they can very easily end up having an overpayment. So, like I briefly mentioned, even if only one spouse receives SSI, the resources, which includes the bank account of both parties, is going to be counted for a person who receives SSI towards that 2,000 or 3,000 limit of resources. So sometimes, spouses have different bank accounts, and if the person receiving SSI isn't aware of what is in their spouse's account, it could potentially push them over that limit. And then Social Security will find that they were overpaid. There are some exclusions to the resources that SSA counts against that $2,000 or $3,000 limit. Some examples are the house that you're living in, which is referred to as the principal place of residence. The funds from selling your principal place of residence, as long as that money is going towards buying a new house and it's within 3 months. So if you need to sell your home, as long as you're buying a new home and you intend to reside there, that money in between, those two phases, as long as you do it in a timely manner, is not going to count against you. Additionally, you can have one car that is used for transportation, and that's one car per household, not per person. That's not counted, and there's no value on the actual car itself. So whether it's a new car or a used car, the equity, the loan, it doesn't matter. You're allowed to have one car as long as you use it for transportation. Additionally, household goods and personal effects. So, clothing, just general furniture and other items that are in your home, those are not going to count against you. SSA is not going to come out and look at your home and sum up, how much everything is worth that's in it. So long as it's not actual liquidated, cash. Another thing that's not going to count against that resource limit is tax refunds, which is good to know since we're kind of in that time period right now. Any tax refunds that you receive are excluded as a resource in your bank account for up to 12 months. So, even if that money stays there, you've got 12 months to spend that down before that starts counting against you as a resource. Additionally, grants, fellowships, or gifts that are used to pay tuition fees or other necessary educational expenses, specifically at an actual educational institution, are exempt for 9 months from counting over your resource limit. The other thing that a lot of times will lead to an overpayment is the resources or the income of family members. As I said, this can occur a lot with married couples who share, bank accounts or more likely have separate bank accounts, but also that family member's income. If they work or they receive some kind of income, maybe inconsistently, that money can count towards the spouse's limit and can impact their eligibility to receive SSI. Additionally, being listed on a bank account jointly with anyone, doesn't have to be a spouse. Sometimes, we have older, elderly parents will put clients on their account with them to maybe help them, pay bills or something. Being listed on a bank account jointly to the Social Security Administration leads to a presumption that all of that money is yours to spend, and therefore they're going to count 100% of that bank account that you're listed on against you as a monthly resource. So, again, when I said that we have, sometimes elderly parents will add their children on, anything that goes into their account is going to count, now towards the person that, maybe that's not really their money to spend. But having your name on it as an owner to the Social Security Administration, they're going to count that, and that can very, very quickly push you over the resource limit since it's so low. Another common issue that we see is when it's the children who are on SSI. A portion of the parent's income can be also a parent and a step parent if the child's living in that household. A portion of their income and their resources are what's called deemed to be the child's income and resources. So if the income that the parents receive is over that federal benefit rate, that 943, or if their resources exceed $2,000, and it is $2,000 because it's the child's resource limit, unfortunately, that child's going to become ineligible for SSI. So when we have these situations, a lot of times Social Security will kind of discover or uncover, these facts in retrospect, and then look back at months or sometimes, full years that people were receiving SSI. And if SSA is now saying you are not eligible or you were not eligible when you received these benefits, they're going to assess that you have an overpayment. And resource limits, when are you ineligible for SSI? The resource limit is assessed by SSA on the first day of every month. So it's really, if you think of it as the last day of each month, in order to view the month in whole, it's the first of the next month. That's when they will look at the resource limit and do income testing. And income is tested using gross income for the entire month. So a lot of people will just look at their paychecks. This is, again, mostly for income. We're talking about, the parents of children on SSI. They'll look at their paychecks and how it was determined. But it's really that gross income, the full amount before benefits, before taxes are taken out. That's what Social Security is looking at. And if that monthly amount for any month goes over the federal benefit rate, and then it's deemed too high as a child's income, the child's going to be ineligible for SSI, or for resources, the adult will be ineligible for SSI for that particular month. And you can be ineligible for certain months, here and there. Or you can be ineligible for, like I said, an entire year, or sometimes it's multiple years. And somebody who is ineligible for 12 months consecutively is going to have to do a new application for SSI. But if you're only ineligible for maybe 1 month or two, once you've corrected whatever caused that issue, you do become eligible again. And so you can receive your benefits, again after that. So for overpayments, as I said, when Social Security determines in retrospect that someone was ineligible for a month they already were paid for, they call this an overpayment, and they're going to ask that the money be paid back in full, either by lump sum or withheld from future checks that you receive, assuming that a person can still receive SSI. If you are not eligible for SSI again on an ongoing basis, that money will still have to be paid back, usually with a payment plan or something of that nature, depending on the amount of money that is due from the overpayment. So when Social Security assesses an overpayment, they do have to send a notice, and it should be labeled notice of overpayment. It should state the amount that was overpaid, the time frame, the time periods that they're determining you were overpaid, along with the specific amounts that you were either paid when maybe it should have been a lower amount, or if you were not eligible at all. There should be a breakdown within that notice. So these notices are critical. If you get one, it's got a lot of details in it that are very important. From the date that is printed at the top of that letter, that's the date that Social Security is going to go by, you have 65 days to respond. And that's made up of, the letter itself will say that you have 60 days to file an appeal, and they also give you 5 days in which they assume that you've received this in the mail. So there's kind of that snail mail delay that they're giving you. So for a total of 65 days from, like I said, the date that it's printed, not the date that you pulled out of your mailbox. So you've got 65 days to do an appeal. And the first stage of an appeal with Social Security is called a request for reconsideration, usually. And this is appropriate when Social Security has got the actual facts of the situation wrong. So you actually were not ineligible. So maybe, they said, well, you had $5,000 in your bank account. If there's an error, that you can prove by gathering bank statements or something to show, you did not actually have that, or maybe you did, but it was one of the exceptions that, I previously mentioned. Maybe that was a tax return that you have for that month. You can do an appeal and point out those facts to Social Security, tell them, I had under $2,000. The rest of this money was a tax return. So you're allowed to have that. You're telling Social Security that the facts are wrong, in which case, you were eligible for it. So you shouldn't have an overpayment. So those are the situations where you want to do an appeal. If you were in fact ineligible for SSI in the months that SSA says, rather than an appeal, you can submit what's called a request for waiver of your overpayment, as long as you meet two criteria. You have to have a financial hardship that prevents repayment of your overpayment, and you have to show that you were not at fault for the overpayment. And not at fault in this case, according to, Social Security, unfortunately, is not just a failure to tell Social Security about additional income or resources that you have, or not knowing the rules and the limits that are in place, not knowing maybe that your spouse had more money, not knowing that that extra car that you had was going to count against you. These are not things that will absolve you of fault, according to the Social Security Administration. So if there's some other issue that happens that, that makes you not at fault, you can argue that in your overpayment waiver, and submit it. Or if there's some other reason that goes against, what's just and equitable, or if it goes against the purpose of having SSI as need-based assistance, you could put that in a waiver and submit it. And then it's essentially up to the discretion of the worker at the Social Security Administration to go over that waiver and either grant it or deny it. So for total cessation of SSI benefits, if the administration determines that you are currently over income or over resource, they will stop your benefits. And a lot of times this happens along with that notice of overpayment. We'll have, an overpayment and a cessation at the same time. If the income stops that was being received, usually, like as I said, for SSI, a lot of times, you can't work while receiving SSI, but maybe there's some other kind of income that comes in sporadically, like child support payments that are received maybe, 1 month and then nothing, and then, another month. And sometimes, Social Security will take the order that they have for child support payments and apply it across the board. If someone isn't actually receiving those payments, your income goes down, or if the resources that you had that pushed you over the $2,000 or $3,000 limit, if you've spent those down legitimately, you can have your SSI benefit reinstated as soon as you're, now eligible once again. And as I mentioned, if someone is ineligible for 12 months consecutively, unfortunately, rather than just showing that, currently you meet the requirements, you're going to have to start a new application for your SSI to receive those benefits, kind of back at the beginning of that process. And that having to start the process over again is one of the reasons why the appeal deadline on the notice is so important. Because if Social Security is incorrect and you were eligible, and it's, for over 12 months, you're looking at having to begin a process that could potentially take, up to a year or more, going through starting again with your application, especially if it's for a disability. So RSDI is the other type of Social Security that people think of. And what Social Security will refer to it as old age and disability insurance. It's also known as Title II. And this includes Medicare coverage after someone has been eligible for 2 years. So old age and disability insurance is usually when people just say flat out Social Security. It's retirement benefits, survivor and spousal benefits. It also includes SSDI, which is Social Security disability. The difference from SSI being that it's based on work credits that someone accumulated over their lifetime and money that they paid in Social Security taxes. As long as you have a sufficient number of work credits, the amount that you pay in is what determines the amount of the benefit that you're entitled to receive in RSDI. So this doesn't have a limit, doesn't have the federal benefit rate limit that SSI does, because as I said, it's just based on how much you personally paid in during your working lifetime. And SSDI, Social Security Disability insurance, can be applied for at any time when a person becomes disabled, and disability under Social Security's definitions, and you're unable to work for over a year. Retirement benefits can be received at age 62, but that's considered early retirement. And what you're going to get with that is a permanent penalty that decreases the benefit you're paid for your retirement. And even once you reach full benefit age, that amount is not going to jump up. So if you are at age 62 and decide that you need to take your retirement or you want to, you're going to get a penalty based on what your full retirement age is. And once you incur that penalty, it's going to stay that way. At this point, retirement age does fluctuate. We think of it typically as 65 years old, but for people who were born later, people who are younger, that age is getting older and older. So it could be 67, in the future it might be even older, just as we get to the point where younger people are hitting these retirement ages. So depending on the year that you're born, which you can find listed on Social Security's website, or on your own statements that give this information along with how much you might be entitled to, it will include your full disability age. But if possible, waiting until you reach that full age, then you will get 100% of the benefits, for the rest of your lifetime based on how much you earned and put into the system. So RSDI also comes with auxiliary benefits, unlike SSI. A lot of times family members or relatives can be eligible for additional benefits paid to them based on the worker. I say the worker as the main person who's receiving the SSDI or the retirement. So for an RSDI recipient who is either actively receiving benefits or if they're entitled to those benefits by age, so maybe somebody is their full retirement age is 65, they're 67, but they're not receiving retirement because they're working, they're still age eligible to receive their benefits. And so that triggers this ability for other people to possibly, receive benefits based on that. For the spouse of a worker, they can receive the amount equivalent to 50% of the worker's RSDI if, that working spouse's benefit is higher than what they could get based on drawing from their own account. So, maybe they only worked part-time their whole life, spouse worked full-time, spouse's benefit is $1,500 and their own would only be, let's just say maybe $200. Rather than take just the $200 every month, they can draw off their spouse's account and their earning history and receive 50% of what their spouse is entitled to. In order to be eligible for this, the spouse must be married for at least 12 months and they have to be age 62 or older or caring for the worker's biological children, as long as those children are under 16 or they are disabled. Another person who's eligible to draw these benefits is actually the divorced spouse. And they can receive that same 50% benefit if that's greater than what they would receive. as long as they were married to the worker for at least 10 years and they've been divorced for 2 years. The person also has to have not remarried. So if you have remarried, you can't draw off the earnings account of, you know, your previous spouse. But if you are subsequently divorced again, there is some ability to still draw off of the first spouse's account. And that becomes, you know, important if you were married for a long period of time and then maybe you have a short marriage later. But you do have to be unmarried when you apply for these divorce spouse benefits. But that is a great benefit, you know, for someone who maybe was, you know, the caretaker of the children for their whole lives, and now they've reached retirement age and they've gotten divorced, but that ex-spouse had significant earnings. Eligible dependent children of the worker are also generally able to receive up to 50% of the worker's benefits. The only caveat being that there is a family maximum benefit amount set by Social Security that includes the worker, spouse, the children, kind of that immediate family unit. And everyone together, including, you know, so it'd be 100% of the worker benefit that they're receiving, along with however much the spouse is receiving, and the children can't go over that maximum amount set by Social Security. And they will adjust, you know, the beneficiaries, the dependent beneficiaries award benefits in order to fit within that. An ex-spouse drawing off of, you know, an account of a worker, that is not going to be included in the maximum benefit amount. So having an ex-spouse who's drawing off your account is not going to impact you in any way. That only impacts, you know, that divorced spouse and how they're receiving money. For survivor benefits, current spouse or current surviving spouse is entitled to 100% of the deceased worker's benefits when that surviving spouse reaches their full retirement age. Again, if someone files early for that benefit, it's going to be permanently reduced. So it's still subject to that that decrease if you take it. You're eligible, surviving spouses are eligible to get it at age 60, as long as they were married for at least 9 months before the worker's death. If someone becomes disabled within 7 years of the worker's death, they only have to be age 50 to start drawing off those benefits. But again, drawing between the time that you're eligible, with being either age 60 or age 50, depending on your circumstances, the difference between that time and your full retirement age, how many years that is, how many months that is, that's going to determine how much that benefit is decreased. So you're only going to get 100% of the benefit when you're at your full retirement age. For surviving divorced spouse who's over age 60, or again, who's age 50 but becomes disabled, they can also be entitled to 100% of the worker's benefits, as long as they were married for those 10 years and not remarried. So the only difference here is being a surviving spouse who's divorced and, you know, the worker being alive when you apply for benefits. The survivor benefits for children of a worker when those children are under age 18, or if they're 19 but still in high school, or if there is an adult disabled child, the children are entitled to up to 75% of the worker's benefits. So ineligibility for SSDI, even though there is not a resource limit like there was with SSI, since it's not need-based, there are some other income limits instead. People can work while they're on SSDI. A lot of people will work part-time, but Social Security will look at the gross wages earned per month on average. And according to their rules, that amount that people are working on average per month cannot exceed a certain amount that they call the limit your substantial gainful activity, the SGA. So this number for 2024 is $1,550. So someone who is disabled on SSDI, but maybe can work a little bit part-time, as long as they do not make over $1,550, they can still earn that income. Anyone who does earn over SGA is unfortunately going to be considered not disabled, because it's part of their definition that they use to determine disability. In order to be disabled, you have to be unable to work an amount that constitutes substantial gainful activity. So if you are receiving it, then, obviously by definition, they're going to say, well, so you're not in fact disabled. And therefore you're ineligible for SSDI in the months that, you were working that amount or greater. There are some caveats to this. It gets a little bit more complicated, but in general, that's the rule. If you make over $1,550 in a month while receiving SSDI, you will be found to be ineligible for SSDI benefits. And that can also be, going forward. So again, for an overpayment, if someone was paid by for a certain amount of time and Social Security decides you actually were not disabled, you owe that money back as an overpayment. There was a rule change on March 25th of this year that limits repayment of overpayments to 10% of a person's ongoing check. So assuming that they're still eligible for SSDI, it used to be that Social Security could seize the entirety, 100% of that check to go towards your overpayment. And as of March 25th, they changed that so that by default, they will only withhold 10%, which is a really big change and a big quality of life change for a lot of people. Because oftentimes, we're talking about SSDI, it's a disabled person who really, for all intents and purposes, can't work. And when Social Security would take the entire check, they were left without money and without a way to make any more money. So upon receiving an overpayment notice, the options to appeal or do a waiver of overpayment are going to be the same as those I mentioned for SSI previously. So you would have the 65 days to file your appeal. For RSDI benefits other than disability, so usually we're talking about retirement, a person who's on early retirement can still work part-time, but they can't make over the annual earning limit, which Social Security sets every year. For 2024, that annual amount is $22,320. And then once a person reaches their full retirement age, they're no longer subject to any earnings limit. So you can be receiving your full retirement payment and also working a full-time job if you wanted to. They determine that once you hit that full retirement age, it's kind of, your money as you see fit to do with, and you can continue to grow it if you keep working while receiving it. Okay, and that's all I have for today's presentation. So essentially, as I said in throughout the PowerPoints, there's two different types of Social Security. We've got SSI, which is need-based, and that's the one that is limited by income, limited by resources, especially. And then we've got the other RSDI, which includes SSDI in retirement. And there are, a couple of limits that Social Security puts on those, not as much, but with all of these, it's really important to make sure that Social Security is got up-to-date information, especially financial information, with the really big issue that we see being when there's an overpayment, it's because someone has already received that money and now you're responsible for paying back, could be 5 months, could be 2 years, and that adds up really fast. So I think the most important thing, if you are going to become, ineligible or not be able to receive those benefits, you want to make sure that it happens in a timely manner. So, you can figure out your finances accurately and on time without dealing with some big kind of almost loan type payment that ends up resulting.
Hey, great. I want to thank you so much for all that terrific information, and we want to thank everyone for joining us for today's presentation. If you have any questions, please comment and we will follow up. And just let everybody know that Law in the Library will return in September. Please check the library's website during the summer for topics, dates, and times. With that, I want to say thank you and have a great afternoon.